Yeah, that's very true for small countries. Because it's very difficult for small countries. There's just usually not enough people, not enough uh, industry, not enough workforce, sometimes not enough resources. And if you're Slovakia and then geographically you have Poland and the Ukraine and Hungary and Austria and the Czech Republic, that's a lot of pressure on a small area. And the fact that Slovakia exists at all is a little bit of a miracle, I think, when you look at the last 2,000 years of history. There were a lot of books written in the first half of the 20th century, so from 1900 to the Second World War. A lot of books were written about development of the world and how we would progress forward. And this idea that we could all live together peacefully if there were 200 different countries doing 200 different things. It's really complicated. The positive side is that problems can be localized in one area. But with the development of technology, and now you can get in a plane here and fly around the world in 12 hours. It's very easy to move and to mobilize, and not just to fly one person, but to fly a lot of people and move a lot of people. And it was different in the past. Life was slower. If there were problems, the problems moved more slowly, because if you had an army in Germany, it took 2 or 3 days to get to France, right? Sometimes longer. So people had more time. Now people don't have time, and the plan that started with the League of Nations in the First World War. But even before that, you go back to the writing of Francis Bacon and the development of the Northern America and the United States. There was a plan to basically divide the world into 5 regions and have them globally managed. And it was geographical, it was practical, it was by continents. It was North America, South America, Europe, Asia, or Russia and Asia, and then sort of Australasian region. And then of course you've got Antarctica as well, but nobody really wanted to live there because it's not very practical. And so the idea was that we could get stability with this principle of 5 regions.
Yes.
In fact, if you go back and look at the Olympic flag, what's
5?
Yeah,
5.
you see that was a part of the plan. The plan was to bring everybody together and to get them to work together for this principle of 5 regions or 5 areas. Now, of course, it's much more complex than that, because we've got culture and language and religion, and these little things make big problems, right? in different areas. So part of what we have today with organizations like the United Nations is a push for 5 regions that balance against each other with power. And practically, if you look at the growth of China, there's no way that small European countries could compete with China. It's just not possible. And yet, on the other side, you don't want to be China because that's not good. I mean, that's a totalitarian, communist dictatorship. It's a top-down structure. There's almost no democracy within the system. It's one rule, one way, one method for everybody, and there's no freedom, and because there's no freedom, everyone is unhappy, and everybody wants to leave. Right?
It's horrible for me.
It's horrible for a lot of people, and I personally have never been to China, so I don't know what it's like there, but I have friends who have been, and they all tell me that it's terrible.
But from China, nowadays, we have some problems with coronavirus.
This question mark.
Maybe.
Question mark. Okay. It's a big geopolitical problem, and I personally, I don't know if it's a problem or it's not a problem, but I will tell you what I do know. Number one, the real problems are never on the news. They never tell, the people in power never tell the people what is going on, because if the people knew the truth, there would be a revolution tomorrow. Right? So, number one, what do you not want? You don't want panic, right? You don't want panic. And if you say to people, oh, big virus, deadly virus, thousands of people, 40 million people will be trying to leave China. Or 200 million people will be trying to leave China. So you don't want that as a result. So you or we will never know what the truth is. We will never know if it's just a tiny little thing and they make a big news story out of it, or if it's a really big thing and they make a small story out of it. But the one thing that I think that we can be sure of is they will not tell us the truth about it. Because for example, the real terrorism is not on the news because that's too scary for people, right? It's just it's too frightening, so it's never on the news. We hear little bits and pieces, but we never hear the whole stories. So yeah, there are a lot of viruses that have at various times spread and caused problems. Most of the problems negative, although You could say the Spanish flu ended the First World War. That's what caused the end of the First World War. So I mean that's like a, and it sort of functions like a biological weapon. I see. I don't believe. I know people are crazy, right? But I don't believe anyone is crazy enough to think I can control this, right? Nobody, because no. Let's let out the virus. I don't think anyone is really that crazy. I mean, we do get crazy people, but that's another level of madness. And what normally happens, I will explain what normally happens. What normally happens is governments have a lot of laboratories. In these laboratories, the governments are testing a lot of things. What does this do with this? What does that do with that? When you mix this together. Now, laboratories are run by people. And people make mistakes. Even if you have robots, the robots are programmed by people. And the robot doesn't make a mistake, but the person makes a mistake. And usually what happens is parts of the government are running experiments. I don't exactly know why they do a lot of these things, but if you look around, for example, there are some American universities that have nuclear power stations in the universities. But you never read about it on the news. But there's a nuclear power station in the university. But it's not. But nobody knows about it because otherwise they would not go and study at the university because it's a nuclear power station, right? So that's one example. And in the place where the virus theoretically originated, there is government laboratory for the experimentation with microbiology. And I imagine that somebody gets a little bit of something on their shirt or their jacket or their coat. This virus gets out, and we have to try to contain it. Now, medical science is very highly developed now. You can take any little virus and sort of study it and understand what it is and where it came from. So, it's a code. It's a pattern. It's a language. Biology is a language. You can study it, and you can know where it came from and how it was created, and you can see the patterns within it. So I think it's very easy for the scientists to get the data, get the information, and to understand how to deal with this problem. So I don't think it's a big problem. However, you can make a lot of money from problems. And so if you are selling, say, vaccinations, or you're selling hygiene equipment, or or you want to, let's just say it will affect some businesses positively and some businesses negatively. Look at airline businesses, yeah? If you've got planes. People not traveling, people not booking, it can destroy companies. And it doesn't even have to be real. You just put a story on the news saying don't go there because there's a virus, and nobody goes, nobody buys tickets. The travel, the transit, the trade all stops. So it is a possibility that this could be economic sabotage.
Yes.
The use of biology to create economic change. And I have a theory. I'll give you my wild theory, right? My wild, I don't have a lot of evidence for this, but I give you, it's interesting to hypothesize the idea, the theory. At the top, there are different groups of people with different agendas. The big organizations, the big companies. And these companies want control of everything.
Yes.
They want to, these are, look, the mid-tier companies are capitalist, but the companies at the top are communist. Because they don't want competition. They don't want competition. Like banks. Banks don't want competition. So I think that at the top there are big games happening, and